Hello everyone, welcome back to Boys on Film. My name is Phil and I'm joined once again by the fabulous Sean Vickers, who's just there.
Hi.
Now you might remember a few months ago, perhaps even a year ago, it might have been longer, we reviewed an amazing documentary about polystyrene, which was directed by Paul Sng, who is back with a new film, a documentary once again about the life and talent of British social documentary and activist photographer Tish Murtha. Similarities here because once again we've got a daughter telling the life story of her mother, and that's what we have with the polystyrene documentary. So, you know, obviously same director.
Tish Murtha was, as Phil said, a social documentary photographer and filmmaker from the northeast.
Yeah.
She took photos across South Shields, Scotswood, Newcastle, and really she captured and documented over a period of time a body of work that talked to really the impact of poverty and the impact of the shutting down of the shipbuilders in the northeast. And she has this incredible story really about how she's able to capture real life and also capture the joy of real life in situations that are actually quite sad and quite run down, but having grown up in similar neighborhoods and environments, she's almost invisible to her neighbors, so she manages to capture something quite incredible about this period of time in the UK.
I've got to say, wonderful photographs. I didn't know anything about Tish Murtha before this documentary, so I feel grateful that Paul Sng has introduced me, and also Ella, of course, the daughter of Tish, to her work, because I think her work is fascinating on so many levels. And also, you mentioned the sadness of the stories, obviously, because she's capturing real life, and there is a lot of bleakness there, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of anger. But what is beautiful about these photographs is that these people are captured, and there is a lot of love and a lot of light in those photographs, as well as obviously the surrounding.
Yeah, what I would say is the British Culture Archive, which you can check out, has a set of her editions that you can buy. And I have, which is one, Cops Piss Off.
Which is her favourite, isn't it?
Yeah, Cops Piss Off, I've got that. And I think what's amazing is, and you've touched on it there, I think often with this kind of intense documentary photography, people from outside these kind of neighborhoods and communities go in and they kind of try to capture a bleakness. And what I love about a lot of her work is the joy.
Yeah.
So within these quite, run down and awful settings are often a lot of children and youngsters having a fantastic time and living their lives. And there's a lot of work like that. There's a snowball fight. There's a whole bunch of them when you go through the documentary, which are absolutely joyous. And it is set against quite a miserable backdrop. And I think that's where Tish does a phenomenal job of presenting real life, but not necessarily, I think what people wanted at the time was this gritty, miserable edge.
Yeah.
And she was never prescribed to that. And that's what I think is quite wonderful about her work.
Absolutely, and her motivations and political views are brought to life through diary entries. We've got letters and writings that have all been collected and kept. Her daughter obviously shares those, but it's narrated by Maxine Peake, who I've got to say is the best person to deal with this story, because she's also a bold, fiery, amazing, intelligent woman that I think totally gets Tish's life. And there are so many similarities, I think. So I think she's a really good choice, a very driven woman, obviously. And her vocal delivery is really, at times, slightly frightening, because you get this sense of this really powerful woman that is taking no nonsense from anyone. So she's obviously a really, fired up woman, and I just think she's really great. And also the moments towards the end, obviously we've got the sad ending to this life, which we'll talk about a bit later, but Maxine's delivery also is quite, it's a lot weaker, but you still get this sense of this quintessentially Tish person in all aspects.
I think this film really touched me, actually.
Yeah.
I thought this documentary really touched me, and I'm going to make no bones about it. I'm going to give it a super high review, because for me, I grew up in Sheffield, and I grew up off the back of early 80s, so declining coal, declining the steel making. And I've seen estates like this in Sheffield that are completely devastated and completely run down, and people getting on with their lives in something that was quite bleak, especially, Thatcher's Britain. So when I saw a lot of these photos Tish had taken, they really moved me. They were really touching. They really resonated with me. And that was happening across the north in many industries that were in decline, and people were just meant to get on with it. And I think what's amazing about Tish's work is there's a combination of trust, and that trust that people gave her equated to the access that she got into these communities. And I think that's incredible. And I know within the documentary they talk about how, there were several people saying, well, we need a photographer that does this kind of thing, and it was all a bit middle class and all a bit you need to show. And she wasn't that person at all. And I'm really kind of like in awe of her. I think she's quite amazing that she stood by her politics and her principles, especially like when she was living in the Northeast, and then also when she moved to London. So I find her, I'm super intrigued, and the documentary really was just fantastic.
I think that's what made it even more powerful. I think there's definitely a real skill in putting together a documentary like this, and I think Paul Sng has really thought carefully about her life, not just the subject matter, because obviously you've got to know a lot about a person, but also the input, because of course we've got so many people that feature in this documentary. But I think music is important. I think the way the film is edited is important, how something is framed in time, and also the subject matter, because of course we're not just talking about her life, we're talking about her work. It's got to have a mood, it's got to make you feel moved, which I think this documentary certainly does. And I think it's about understanding the subject matter. And when you think about, Tish's photographs, they're all beautifully framed. It's not just about capturing that image. It's about also what's happening in the background. And you think about stuff that's maybe out of focus. That tells a story as well, because it's about the location. It's not just about the people in that location. It's about everything. It's about the whole picture. And I think that's what the documentary does well. It's thinking about everything.
And I totally agree. I think she's kind of an unsung hero because she's kind of central. I think what's important is, she's central to documentary filmmaking in this period, and I think she's an unsung hero. So I'm really glad. I know now she has a permanent collection in the Tate, which is incredible. And I think it's what she has done for documentary filmmaking in this era really needs to be lauded and amplified. So I'm really thrilled this documentary exists, and
yeah.
I think that, you touched on this earlier, but, Thatcher talked about this idea of forced idleness. Like, somehow, even though we're going to decimate entire industries and communities, everyone's just idle. They don't want to work. And again, that's what resonated with me growing up in South Yorkshire, surrounded by steel making and coal, is suddenly a lot of people were not working, but it's this idea that they were just idle, they didn't want to work, and their entire career and industry and knowledge had been wiped out overnight or over a very short period of time. Again, it's something that we kind of talk about now and it's in plain sight, but at the time, this idea that people were just like scroungers or idle or whatever, even though entire communities had been decimated through Thatcher Britain. So, she's incredible. And so that's why I'm lauding Tish, because I think the work she's done is powerful and is urgent even today. And so this gets a very super high rating from me.
Can I just say also that I think Tish was striking to look at, and you look at some of those portraits, oh my God, you see a certain sadness in her eyes as well, which again tells a story, but also she had a kind of a look of Elizabeth Olsen, like those amazing eyes. And I just think that itself was really powerful to see the pictures. I mean, so many powerful elements to this documentary. There's a really moving moment when you hear an audio recording of Ella, who's obviously featured in the documentary. She's kind of putting all this together and interviewing family and friends. But you hear her singing at a very young age, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The camera pans in on a card that her mother, Tish, had put together, and she'd drawn this heart, and underneath it says the words Tish's Ticker, giving you my heart. And that just, I was ugly crying in quite a lot this documentary, especially towards the end, because it just moved me so much, the whole story. And also the fact that Tish was failed by so many people. She was failed by the Arts Council. She put an application in that was rejected. Was that Middlesbrough, I think, when she moved back to Middlesbrough, which of course is where she died as well. And she was failed by the government, and like so many other people that she was trying to trying to help and trying to support.
There has to be some joy that comes out of this, and I think her work is joyous.
Oh, absolutely.
And as I say, it's a body of work rather than a single image, and that it has to be celebrated for that. As I say, the sense is that she struggled. Arts Council England and whoever wanted a very particular portrait of the crumbling North. And if you don't succumb to that, then, you know, that wasn't what they were interested in, but it also wasn't the truth. It's tinged a lot with sadness, but we have to, I think it's about lifting this work up and celebrating it for what it was.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of ways that her life did help others in her passing as well. Obviously, she died of a brain aneurysm. I think it was the day before her 57th birthday in 2013. In her last days, we see Maxine narrating the story, and we see an actor who's obviously playing the part. We don't see her face, we just see her back, and we see her making cups of tea and putting a record on and other things. And you see her putting together her CV, desperately trying to get work, but not having... her photography work as the main focus to get work. She's trying to get work in other fields because obviously she wants to work. She's a person like many others that are featured in this documentary that wants to work but just isn't able to because there's just no work there. But we see her putting on the CV, I'm a keen photographer and I develop my own photos, almost like it's an afterthought. And that is heart-wrenching because you know that she has this talent and she's just not able to have this talent as a job that makes her money and gives her an income. You feel so much for her because she's just not able, she's not in that position to feed herself. And you hear her daughter saying that, you know, there were weeks where she would either have heat or food, and some weeks she wouldn't eat at all. She just didn't have the money. I think her daughter was saying that she had £100 given back to her after her mum's passing because she was actually in credit. She didn't realise.
But I think it comes back to my point for which I think why the work is urgent, because that is exactly the same as what is happening today with the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
So people are like, heat or eat. And so these are cyclical stories around how we in this country find ourselves and how people have to struggle to get by. And Tish had an incredible art and eye to be able to capture this. And that's why I think we need to look at these images, and yes, they are images of the past, but they also reflect today as well in a different way. An amazing individual, as a tinge with sadness, as you said, Phil, but I think there's some green shoots of her work being celebrated again.
The fact that her work is now in the Tate, has been in the Tate, her organs saved the lives of, I think it was 4 women and a man as well. There's an amazing finale to this documentary that does celebrate a lot of her life as well, and you know the sadness is obviously part of it and it makes it more important, the story, but there is a lot to celebrate here, and also the fact that we can see her work. And I think in some ways, although you know the Arts Council, the government did fail her, I think her life is now being celebrated, and I think that's definitely a great thing.
100%.
So star rating, Sean?
5.
Yes,
without a shadow of doubt.
Absolutely. I agree. Like I said earlier, I ugly cried. It moved me. I was fascinated by her life story. Didn't know anything about her before, which is kind of weird because I guess she is a well-known figure, a well-known photographer.
Yeah, it's very true. You know, there's it makes me smile. I won't mention names. There's like big American photographers who try and capture this, and you know they go, and there's always jokes about it in the art world, like, I'm going to go and capture this kind of like disheveled, decrepit town, but I must stay in a Four Seasons and I must have this, that, and the other. Yeah. You know what I mean? And there's loads of jokes about those kind of photographers who go, I really capture it, I'm really in it, but please ensure that, you know, I'm absolutely, my rider is the following.
Yeah, and they're not living it, are they? They're not living that experience.
I come back to like trust equals access. Yeah. And you know, she lived and breathed this and stood by her community. So, brava, 100%.
I can't remember who said it in the documentary. I think it might have been a friend rather than someone in the family. But he was saying what was so great about her was that she was there and she was living that experience and understanding the subject matter. She wasn't just there, just taking photos randomly of a scene. She was there and she was understanding what was going on. So, another tick.
Very rare we give 5 stars, Phil, but this one is so well deserved.
I know, yeah, absolutely, I agree. It's a documentary from filmmaker Paul Sng. It opens in cinemas on the 17th of November, so do check it out. It's highly recommended by us, and let us know what you think of it when you do get around to seeing it, and let us know if you know about her work. Drop a comment down below. We were talking about that documentary that Paul Sng made before, which was the polystyrene documentary. That is on screen now, so click on our review, find out more if you don't know much about it already, and we'll see you soon for Boys on Film.
See you soon.